This is the best of First and Last, the podcast.
Cavaliers go out and win again in convincing fashion, 103, in the second round of the Eastern Conference playoffs over Toronto on their home court. You heard there LeBron James in the process, passing Kareem Abdul-Jabbar for the second most points in postseason history all time. Now just 211 points behind Michael Jordan. Needed to pass him. In what was another dominant performance from a Cavs team that we criticized a lot coming out of round one for winning yet another series sweep, another round one sweep for LeBron James, but not winning by nearly enough for the standards of most. So how do the Cavs respond in tow? Well, they decide that they'll go out and take the team in the Eastern Conference that most people thought had built their roster up to stop this Cavs team, to stop this LeBron James-led team, thought they might have had the best chance of anyone to give them a run in the Eastern Conference, and now they'll head back to the 6. They'll have a chance up there on their home court. It is worth noting that last year, Toronto lost the first 2 games of the series by 50 points and then won the next 2 after that, but wouldn't bet on it at this point.
Not a series till someone loses at home, Mike.
Those are the facts. Those are the facts. They always say it for, it's one of those things they always say. They always say it for a reason, Dan. They always say it for a reason because it's probably true.
No, Toronto loses game 3. It's 3-0. Series is over.
They're going to lose game 3. This series is over.
Hot take.
That doesn't even feel like a hot take. Like, it feels like such a gimme at this point to bet on the LeBron James-led Cavs the way they're starting to look in this playoffs here now, because we just mentioned the big stat coming off of last night, and you could pull honestly a lot because LeBron James is really just starting to absolutely green mushroom and one-up everyone in these postseason record books. Last night he also became, I think, just the second player since 1984 to score 39 points on fewer than 15 shots in the game last night. He had 15 off free throws, 15 in transition, made 4 threes, which, interesting enough, how about this for a stat? Because we don't often think about LeBron James in this light. LeBron James is now the 4th player with 300 career postseason threes. Joins Ray Allen, Reggie Miller, and Manu Ginobili. Like, one of these things is not like the other in that group. And yet that's the kind of rarefied air that LeBron James, as he continues to just stack up deep postseason runs, is going to start to run into. We know he's up near the top in assists as well, and he's just going to keep adding to the postseason records. Here's another one. 34.2 points per game, the second most in a 6-0 start in postseason history, just behind Kobe Bryant. Just ahead of Michael Jordan. That's a good sandwich to be in. It's a good place. Don't give me that look, Dan. We'll make that Straight Talk brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. Best phones, best networks, half the cost. Straight Talk Wireless, nationwide coverage on America's largest and most dependable networks. And the performance has been so good, so otherworldly, that DeMar DeRozan's actually out here making offers you can't refuse if you can come over and stop the king.
Sometimes it's not even about LeBron. LeBron's going to be LeBron. We got to key out other guys. We can't let Channing Frye go out there and get 20 points. We can't let other guys like that get going. It's just, you find somebody who stopped LeBron, in these moments, and, I give you $100, but it's on us to be able to take out all the other key players and not let them get going and for us to, take advantage of that.
$100. I don't know. It seems awful low considering we've got a league full of guys that GMs have been paying to try and stop LeBron James that fetch a little higher price. So if you're someone out there walking the street who thinks maybe I can cuff LeBron James, just know you can get a lot more than $100 for it. You call me, I'll be your agent. We'll make this happen, and we'll both get a nice little payday. But DeRozan's absolutely right as far as what you need to do. What a great thing for someone to say about you. Like, I would obviously as a player never got to touch that group, that warrior elite of guys be saying, yeah, he's going to get his. Like, we understand that you're not going to stop him from getting his. And to be honest, I don't even know if I fell into that Channing Frye category where it's like, yeah, you got to worry about him going off for, 20 points in a game too. It's like, yeah, all right, we might be able to check this guy. We might be all right letting him just ride out. He's going to self-check a little bit, which, honestly, you could have said that to an extent about the Raptors backcourt last night if you're talking about DeMar DeRozan, who was just non-existent last night as the Cavaliers threw some traps at him, allowed LeBron James to go back there and play center field in a way that really frustrated him last night. Just 2 of 11 shooting in 31 minutes for a whopping 5 points. Kyle Lowry started off the game red hot, was really keeping them in it in the beginning stretch of this game. He left in the middle of the third quarter with a ankle injury. We'll wait and see the severity of that, but limited him for the rest of that game, and a tough moment for Toronto, looking for anything to really grasp at. I mean, if you're Toronto and you're looking for things to build on going forward, you got some big time minutes from Valanciunas, who came off the bench the other night as Toronto goes back to that lineup where they put Serge Ibaka in that center role and try and get a little bit smaller, create a little more matchup help for them. And so Valanciunas responding the way you'd want a guy to, who's now relegated to coming off of the bench. Maybe you can take that home with you and look for something to build momentum on, especially from your bench that will usually play better in those home situations. That's if you're looking for any sort of silver lining. Unfortunately, those really are just going to be hard to come by at this point when, again, you're dealing with just an otherworldly performance. And now what's, I think, becoming the norm of this performance for a guy who's 32 years old and LeBron James, who's having, I heard Brian Windhorst on the way in here talking about one of the best postseason performances so far of his career and being able to do it at this age. And seeing the performances that we've got have resonated with a lot of people, including our own PJ Carlisimo, ESPN NBA analyst, who I think is going to make some waves with this one.
I used to get defensive, I think, because I knew Michael better because I coached against Michael. I knew him for so long, spent so much time with him. And I said, come on, you can't compare the two. Look at the championships. Look at what he's done. Well, guess what? LeBron is shutting me up because he's accumulating those things that what I thought was the difference were the rings and the things that, the consistency that Michael had done. LeBron coming up, you knew how good he was, and people were saying he's better. And I said, wait a minute, he's got to do the same thing. He's got to get those rings. He's got to sustain it for as long as Michael did. Well, he's doing it. And, it's not an accident. He's on that page. We look at the page, and the 2 Hall of Famers bracketing LeBron in the middle. He deserves to be on that page.
So, if I'm hearing him right, which I think I am, sounds like we get back into the greatest debate in sports. LeBron versus Jordan. Thank you, PJ Carlisimo, for the shout right there. Is that something we're getting increasingly more comfortable with, though? Like, you're hearing someone from that Michael Jordan peer group, someone, as PJ noted, coached against Michael Jordan, understands the greatness he brought to the table as well as anyone, and is now starting to see the light with LeBron James that I feel like most people turned the page on after last year's title, after the title that got back to Cleveland. This all of a sudden made a lot of the criticisms null and void. But we'll open it up to you guys, 888-729-3776. Are you getting comfortable with this idea that we might actually be seeing that moment of change?
How many years do you think LeBron has left playing at a high level, making it to the playoffs, and making deep runs?
I would probably say making deep runs, 4 years.
So he's going to pass Jordan in playoff points, all likely, this year.
Oh, yeah.
And then put 4 more deep runs on top of it? I mean, he's going to bury Jordan.
That's the thing is the record books that he's going to rewrite, especially postseason-wise, because we've reconciled that LeBron really doesn't care about the regular season all that much anymore. But the postseason records that he's going to continue to just bury are going to put a ton of difference. And isn't that the time of year we're supposed to wait over everything else? All we hear about is postseason success. Now, I understand the hardware matters a lot in that. But at some point, looking back retrospectively, like we will years down the road, I think history's going to be awful kind to this guy. Just a hunch.
First and last, the podcast.
Talking LeBron James coming off another stellar performance last night. 39 points for King James in a decided victory over the Toronto Raptors. And our own PJ Carlisimo saw it fit to lob us up the softball of all softballs in the sports talk radio business, LeBron versus Jordan. And so we figured we'd open it up to you guys. Let's go to Jack in St. Louis. Jack, you're up here on First and Last. Mike Golic Jr., what's going on?
What's going on, Mike?
How you doing, man?
Man, first of all, nowadays everything is hyped up. LeBron is nowhere close to Jordan. He might be racking up all these records and this, that, and the other. I saw Kareem as a teenager, and I saw Jordan as a teenager up until, as a grown man. LeBron is not even close.
Why?
He's already lost championships. He can only chase Mike in titles. That's about it. But as far as him being the greatest, he has to pass Kobe first.
See, and
a few other guys. He's not even.
Who are the few other guys? I can understand a couple of the names that you've mentioned.
Who was that? Big Shot Bob?
Robert Horry?
Robert Horry, yeah. He's not Robert Horry to me yet.
All right, well,
LeBron.
We appreciate the call. I'm here to entertain a lot of things in this discussion. Hearing Robert Horry's name put above LeBron James, and that's no disrespect to him, is a laughable premise in this conversation. And that's really, I feel like, the only place that the people that want to hold out and die on the hill for Michael Jordan are always going to be able to fall back on that ring conversation, because when you've got comparable players, it's another measurement tool. Like, you can't use someone like Derek Fisher's got 5 rings, but we're not going to put them in the same conversation. Those don't outweigh what LeBron's brought to you as a player. But I feel like that conversation is kind of dismissive of the things that we're watching LeBron James do, especially by people that have seen and been able to compare both groups. I mean, you mentioned watching LeBron as a teenager. Dan, we were talking about this before the show. There are only a handful of athletes in all of sports, like across any sport, that have had the burden of expectation from the time they were 14, 15 years old and gone out and delivered on it. I mean, that list is short, few, and far between. When you're talking about the LeBron James, the Wayne Gretzkys of the world, you could start to argue for a couple of the young guys coming up in the NHL right now, and Austin Matthews and Connor McDavid, of these teenage phenoms that are brought in and said, you are supposed to be the next big thing, and early returns for those guys say they deliver, but LeBron's done it over the course of over a decade of work now.
He brought up, what is to me the worst argument against someone being the greatest, which is he has lost championships. Should you be docked points for losing in the finals, whereas Jordan lost in the first round and LeBron, I don't think, ever has? Should you be docked points for making it farther every year, but somehow that's a knock against you? I don't understand that argument. Because
it's all that crowd has. Like, you see, it's the desperation that starts to fill in, which is strange because, again, Michael Jordan doesn't really need defensing. Like, he's not a guy, like, his resume is always, it's going to echo through eternity. It's going to live on because he was that great. But the Jordan defenders get sensitive very quickly. Now, in this case, I understand because his name was actually invoked. They'll find their way into conversations that really they have no place in. But it is one of those things that they're looking for any flaw in the resume, because when you actually look at it, like, people look, maybe best resume, you could have that conversation, but as an actual basketball player, I don't know how we're still knocking this guy's game, considering all the different facets that he's shown us right now. And so you get a lot of that comes up. You get a lot of the defense of Michael Jordan. You get a lot of the talk about these great players. You don't often hear the conversation from the coaches. Usually we hear, oh, well, these great players have propped a great coach up. We don't usually hear the other side where the coach talks about the difficulties of having to coach one of these all-time great players and what that brings. But that's exactly what LeBron James coach Ty Lue talked about when he was on the ESPN NBA Lockdown podcast.
It's the hardest job by far. It's the hardest job. But, I've been through a lot of tough things in my life anyway, and I just try not to listen to the outside noise, to the media and what they have to say. As long as I have the support of, David Griffin, Dan Gilbert, my players, the city of Cleveland, the state of Ohio, as long as I have that support, that's all that matters. And, I understand that, when I was a player, probably about 7-8 years ago, I'm trying to attack every reporter that said something, but now I've come to the realization that, it's not worth it. And people going to say what they have to say, and, they got to sell books or they got to sell stories. They got to, they have to do that. That's their job. But I don't like it when they make stuff up or they lie and make stuff up. If I didn't do a good job or I didn't do something, then I understand that that's your job. You got to write it. But when you make stuff up, that's the part that I don't get. That kind of makes me mad. But that's okay.
Couple things. It's not going to be well received when you are seemingly saying that because you've got the best tools on the planet as a coach as far as going out and winning, that somehow that makes it the most difficult job. But I can kind of understand the sentiment because, listen, we've seen plenty of coaches come and go with LeBron James. If anything, coaching someone like LeBron James, and you've got two other All-Stars on that roster as well, so you've got plenty to work with. But with a guy that we're grading on such a high curve in LeBron James, we're making it to as many finals as he has in succession, where all those deep postseason runs can be twisted as a negative. You understand that there's a little bit different set of circumstances that all this gets judged by, and that works the same for you. Let's go to the Real J. The Real J, you're on first and last. What's going on?
Yeah, I was telling him earlier that, I was a Jordan fan my whole life. I mean, like, I had the shoes, I had the posters. I had tried to have my game like him when I was playing basketball. But the thing that LeBron is doing now, even if you take offense away from him, he still dominates the game on every level as far as even being a teammate. And then the thing that he's doing is, like, once he lost that finals with Dwayne Wade in 2011, and they came in the next year and said it was LeBron's team, he's raised the level of his game every year. And because of some mishaps, maybe I'll say the 2012 team, 2013 team, when they lost to the Spurs, that was like one of the only times they had a roster, I feel, that they couldn't win. But the thing LeBron is doing is translating. Overachieving, man. He was labeled the king coming out of high school.
Yeah, well, I don't even know if it's overachieving, but it's living up to the otherworldly standard that we put for him. And not only that, usually these guys get great because even with that standard, what they expect of themselves is still greater. And that's the amazing part of all of this.
First and last.
PJ Carlisimo has done it again. He set us ablaze down the path of no return, a path that we know all too well. You can understand it coming off last night's game. Again, last night, the NBA, the Cavaliers beat the Toronto Raptors 125-103. The San Antonio Spurs even the series 121-96 against Houston. But that's not the story coming off of last night. LeBron James passes Kareem Abdul-Jabbar for number 2 in the all-time playoff scoring list, and calamity ensues as PJ Carlisimo decides to light the powder keg that is the LeBron James-Michael Jordan debate.
I used to get defensive, I think, because I knew Michael better because I coached against Michael. I knew him for so long, spent so much time with him. And I said, come on, you can't compare the two. Look at the championships. Look at what he's done. Well, guess what? LeBron is shutting me up because he's accumulating those things that what I thought was the difference were the rings and the things that, the consistency that Michael had done. LeBron coming up, you knew how good he was, and people were saying he's better. And I said, wait a minute, he's got to do the same thing. He's got to get those rings. He's got to sustain it for as long as Michael did. Well, he's doing it. And, it's not an accident. He's on that page. We look at the page and the 2 Hall of Famers bracketing LeBron in the middle. He deserves to be on that page.
Deserves to be on that same page, and most people's eyes rightly so. Let's go to JBT. JBT, you're on first and last with Mike Golic Jr. What's going on, sir?
So earlier this morning, you played DeMar DeRozan offering $100 anybody who can stop LeBron, right?
Yes.
Well, Michael Jordan pays people, they're called the Charlotte Hornets, millions of dollars to try to stop LeBron, and Michael Jordan can't do it. So he can't stop LeBron right now. Why do you think he could have stopped LeBron when they were playing or when he was playing? That's why LeBron is better.
It's a very
I'll hang up and listen.
It's a very woke take from JBT. We appreciate the call. Michael can't do it as an owner. Are we really expecting he can do it as a player? I mean, listen, if John Lynch showed us anything this weekend, this last weekend in the draft, it's that being a GM, being in the front office, is a lot easier than being a player. Just look how easy it was for him in the first round of the draft up there. So
I can't wait to see what LeBron does in the front office.
That's the other thing. A guy with his basketball IQ and acumen. Now, does he do that knowing full well? Because he's also a guy that's pretty dialed into his kids' lives, and depending on when he decides to hang it up, it could time up with them starting to round into their high school careers and stuff like that. He'll be a guy that can obviously afford to not take that job after sports I think, spoiler alert, he's going to be okay, but you're right. Everyone's going to look at his basketball mind. I mean, we've already got another story coming out of the NBA of Kobe Bryant sending Isaiah Thomas some tips and watching his game film during this playoff run to kind of help him out. And Isaiah Thomas talking about what a gifted basketball mind Kobe Bryant has. That's another thing that comes up in the LeBron debate is what a basketball genius he is. And we already think he runs the Cavs anyway, front office-wise. So if you actually put the title to it, it would be an interesting thought.
So then, what if LeBron gets so tired of the Jordan debate towards the end of his career, he's like, you know what? I'm gonna play out the rest of my career as the GM and play. That'll shut you guys up.
Instead of the player coach, the player GM.
Player GM.
Just take Jackie Moon and then go one step further. If he actually formed the expansion Flint Tropics and then was a player GM on that team, then he's better than Jordan. Them and only then. Let's go to Greg in Texas. Greg, you're on first and last. What's going on?
Oh, it's going well, man. I got to disagree with Ty Lue because the reason why, because even the years LeBron didn't win championships with good rosters, nobody ever put the blame on the coaches. And, you look at Ty Lue's situation, not just with LeBron. He has a complete roster with multiple All-Stars, JR, a sixth man in the year, multiple-time winner. You insert any other coach in the NBA to that team, they still guaranteed to win 50 wins in the East. And it doesn't matter what seed they get, obviously, in the East. They can still go to the finals. I don't know why he really went there making those comments.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the call, and I understand why he went there because there are different stressors that come with it. And also, this is kind of the world Ty Lue is used to as far as dealing with stars and dealing with these jobs. I mean, you look at where he was as an assistant. He was with the Celtics and Clippers with Doc Rivers, and then was the assistant head coach in Cleveland when LeBron came back in 2014. So he's always been around this, but LeBron James is the umpteenth version of everything he's dealt with and his only experience as a head coach. So he kind of doesn't know what he doesn't know because we all have seen what the differences can be being an assistant coach, getting to have that more personal relationship with a lot of the players, getting to be the sort of good cop to the bad cop that was David Blatt that ultimately ended up getting him shown the door because he didn't vibe with the players that it's clear Ty Lue has. I mean, I saw another article today, a Q&A with Ty Lue, talking about how he tries to push the right buttons with these guys, and head coaching can be managing personalities, but we mentioned a lot of the other all-time great coaches in this conversation, the Phil Jacksons of the world that made their living, sort of the same debate we have in the NFL with Brady and Belichick, which makes the other more. Is it the player side that makes the coaching side more, or do these coaches beget some of these great players with their tutelage? And we don't have that with LeBron because he's had so many different head coaches. But for Ty Lue, the comp for me and the guy I'd be interested to hear from would be Eric Spoelstra because he's seen how the other half lives in multiple regards. He was the head coach in Miami for 2 years before LeBron got there, where he had the one superstar in Dwayne Wade. He then went through the Big Three era, where a lot of people saw him as just a puppet for Pat Riley after he had stepped away, a guy that was easy to control the strings for, and then now has lived in a world post-Big Three, post even Dwayne Wade, where Deion Waiters has been their best player down there, and has managed to go out and have the season they had there, making chicken salad out of chicken you-know-what with that group at times. So I'd be interested for that perspective of a guy who has seen quite literally the stark drop-off from having that group of players that create the expectation that you have with LeBron James and company.
Does the Phil Jackson Knicks debacle hurt Ty Lue's argument?
In what way? The idea that Phil Jackson now going after?
The idea being that Phil Jackson now maybe looks like he wasn't quite the basketball mind that he might have been, and thus it was really the players.
No, because I still can't, I won't ever use Phil's front office failures as an indictment on coaching just because the two are different. It's one thing to be able to take talent, shape it, and push all those buttons, the way Ty Lue's talking about here, as opposed to identifying the talent and free agents from the outside, identifying guys in the draft, being able to manage the salaries and all the things that go with being a GM that are so wildly different from being a great coach. So that's the one thing with Phil. We have plenty of fun at his expense, and rightly so, because he's been a raging disaster in the front office, but that still doesn't really take away from the coach as much. Let's go to Matt in Connecticut. Matt, you're on first and last. What's going on?
Hey, what's going on, man? How you doing?
Good. How you doing?
Doing good. I wanted to talk about the LeBron James, Michael Jordan debate, and I'm one of the guys who thinks that Jordan is still light years ahead of LeBron.
Okay, why?
Well, watching Jordan, I got to watch him from a kid growing up. I watched basically, when Jordan was young, first coming into the league, scoring all the points. Everybody kind of talked about how Jordan didn't have any defense. What did he do? He went out, changed his game, became one of the defenders of the year. As he got old and we watched his body break down, Jordan went from being, Air Jordan to getting all the turnaround jump shots, crossing guys up. Basically, we watched him, like I said, change his game. LeBron is still dunking on guys. His jump shot isn't perfected yet. I need to see that.
So now we need to see the decline so that we can talk about this. We've moved past, well, he's not good enough in his prime. Now we need to see him work when the skill set's diminished. And you saw it kind of show up a little bit there, but nostalgia is always going to play a part in the Jordan debate. And there is something about that narrative about the guy that got cut from his high school basketball team and the guy that did go and play in college. Forgetting all along the way, that means that he wasn't ready to play in the NBA as young as LeBron James was.
How many of these Jordan calls start with, I watched Michael growing up? That's the be-all, end-all for a lot of these guys. There's nothing LeBron could ever do that will take away from, I watched Jordan growing up.
Yeah, and there might be something to it being when you were a kid, too. Because you heard, the reason we're talking about this, because PJ Carlisimo, a guy who talked about coaching against Michael Jordan and being in that peer group, might be able to parse through this with a little bit more clarity because you don't have those childhood memories attached to watching a guy that feels like yours then. Like we talked about this the other day, but so much of fandom feels like ownership of these moments. That's why I said selfishly I've always rooted for LeBron James to do well because I want to be able to, in the future, say, look at the guy I got to watch in his prime. Look at the guy I got to watch in his heyday, breaking all of these records the way that we've seen it.
First and last.
The latest installment of this O's Red Sox beef. This is the level it's gotten with these games. I really, through the rest of the last two games that we've seen all the fireworks in, couldn't tell you who won. Last night was the first time I actually heard a score assigned to this. The Red Sox won 4-2, by the way, in what seems so secondary in the drop of bucket of a 162-game season to the drama that we've gotten here, which kind of makes me wonder, is baseball taking itself now a little more seriously as an entertainment product? You hear all the talk about how they're going to bring fans, speeding up the game, all this stuff. Just look at what the NBA and the NFL have done at certain times. The WWE mentality of creating entertainment that transcends the game, and that's what we've had in this series. So to catch everyone up, we obviously have the Adam Jones situation that was a lot separate from this to begin in Fenway a couple of nights ago, the ugliness that went on there that spawned a whole separate discussion. But outside of that, we had the continued dust-ups between Manny Machado and the Red Sox, going back to his slide into second on April 21st that preceded a lot of this. So they threw high at Manny Machado a while back. There were suspensions handed out. And then in this latest series, we had the aforementioned throwing from Chris Sale, who, lest we not forget, is a jersey slicing maniac, so shouldn't be too surprising. But Chris Sale throwing behind Manny Machado and everything that ensued there. And so in between that game and the game last night, we had Major League Baseball actually step in and call both of these teams and say, all right, guys, we got to cut this out. We got to handle this situation. So that basically, what in a lot of people's minds acted as the warning. So going into last night's game, there was no preemptive warning handed out to both teams before this. And so what we had occur was a pitch from Kevin Gausman that everyone looking at this from a common sense place, and this sort of leads it to a funny place in this conversation. Everyone sees a 77-mile-an-hour curveball. I think up until this point of the year, this is the slowest pitch that Kevin Gausman had thrown all year on a 77-mile-an-hour breaking ball that just didn't break. And ends up striking the player, ends up hitting Xander Bogaerts and getting Gausman immediately tossed from the game. This is the statement from the home plate umpire last night, because this is the other missing piece of it. So we've had all of this drama. We've had all of these storylines coming from this series. The one thing we've been missing is umpire talk, because that's the other portion of all is this what we bring up is what's the things everyone goes to with baseball when they're trying to fix it? Pace of play. Baseball's too slow. Baseball's not fun enough. There's no bat flips. There's no all these things. You got to stop plunking guys. You got to stop the beanball that goes on. But the other thing is umpires. We love talking about umpires injecting themselves into the situation. So this really rounds out a very complete weekend of baseball, or complete week, I should say, of baseball stories in this game. And what most people will tell you is that last night Sam Holbrook lost control by trying to control too much. And here was the statement from the home plate umpire, Sam Holbrook, last night. Quote, "Just given the situation and the tension between the two clubs and all the stuff that's gone on over the past few weeks, we're all on high alert with anything," Holbrook said. "I know the ball was a curveball, but it hit him square in the back. Just making a split decision at that point there needs to be an end to this stuff. And I feel like the ejection was the right thing to do at the time, and that's what we did. Thankfully, we didn't have any more problems for the rest of the game." Even though that wasn't the last ejection that you had in the game. Because later on in that game, you had the Adam Jones ejection for essentially walking away from the play. And you could argue he was showing up the umpire a bit. It was a fist pump going back towards his locker room in defiance after a call at the plate there.
So tired of the phrase showing up the umpire. So what? Grow up. It's not about you.
I'm with you in the general argument of things, but we also do like that. Part of that statement there was a very human element to this, and that's what you've got. When you continue to have human officials, is so often we understand, because the reason I'll never feel a great deal of sympathy for officials, umpires, etc., is because a lot of times I feel like they escape blame for being just as much of a part of the game. Like we always hear they're a third of the game like everyone else. You've got two teams, and then you've got that third team wearing black and white stripes out on the field. But a lot of times we let them skate responsibilities in a way we don't let players skate. That's why I don't have a problem with 2-minute reports in the NBA or with officials getting taken to task in the NFL for certain things.
The problem in baseball is that the only punishment an umpire can deliver is throwing someone out of a game. In basketball, a guy argues too much, you tee him up. In football, you throw a 15-yard penalty. In baseball, you really only have one recourse, which is to throw the guy out of the game. You can't give the team an out or a strike. There's really no other punishment that an umpire can levy for arguing too much or showing them up, so to speak.
No, and maybe that's what we need. Like maybe there needs to be some middle ground.
Like a base runner, if you're arguing as a pitcher, they get to just have an extra base runner.
Yeah, because
or
you're
an out if you're on offense.
Because you're right, it feels like this is something with too much effect on the game, like where it can be any little slight, and in the name of, like he said, controlling what's going on in the field, because this series had sort of spiraled out of control, which again, you could make the argument is not necessarily a bad thing. We're talking about it. Now, it could be the argument you're talking about it the way we were talking about the Knicks earlier this basketball season, that it's not always a good thing, but it's an entertainment product, and you've gotten some of that so far. So, very interesting looking at what's gone on there. We know now we'll get a break from this bit of series here, but something to keep your eye on going forward in the baseball season. Something to keep your eye on around here is a little something we do all the time on this show to help out our NHL brethren and sisters who are enjoying the playoffs. So, without further ado, as we do around here, this one's for you.
This one's for you, hockey guy.
Sets up Schultz. A slap shot. He shoots and scores! He buries it on Braden Holtby, and the Penguins take the lead 3-2. Oh, get that dog off my lawn. Capitals back. One last chance to move it forward. But it comes to Ovechkin. His pass to Kuznetsov. 5 to go. Down the right side to Williams. To the left side to Shattenkirk. Shooting. Save made off the Curry. Game over.
Going to play it first is Klefbom for Larson. Turned over. In front. They score! The Ducks score the winner on a shot by Jakob Silfverberg.
Those calls courtesy of 105.9 The X and KLAA. Last night, you heard Silfverberg, the OT winner, as the Ducks even the series with the Oilers, 2-2. And then on the other side, the series that we've all been looking at most closely because it's got the stars, was without one of its stars. No Sidney Crosby, still dealing with the lingering effects of that vicious shot to the head from the other night. But no Crosby, no problem. Pittsburgh dispatches Washington 3-2, now takes a 3-1 lead in the series, and well, the Caps might have to already start on the next year is our year bandwagon that seems to be an every year refrain for them.
First and last, the podcast.
I do want to make one brief programming note, however. I hinted at the idea that the Baltimore and Boston series was over. It is, in fact, not. That will continue. Again, the fireworks continue tonight, 7:10 p.m., Baltimore at Boston. So we could have more of that coming up. And also, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the great idea that Dan Z had in the world of plunking that's gone on and become such a focal point of this series. An interesting new twist on this, Dan.
I think this is the perfect time for it, and that is the Major League Baseball relief enforcer, who has one job. He throws one pitch. He doesn't even have a curveball in his repertoire.
Nope.
Throws 98 miles an hour of pure gas, and when he comes out of the bullpen, the opposing manager knows, oh, my next guy's getting hit.
Yeah.
You'll take the suspension. You'll take the punishment. It's fine. He's coming in, and you're getting 98 in the small of the back.
The rest of your team pools together to pay the fines or pay this, help a guy out during a suspension, whatever it is. But yes, baseball's the only sport that doesn't have a goon. Like, you need goons on every team. We've talked about that. Someone said about NBA teams, you need a crazy guy if you're going to win going into the playoffs. Baseball, this is where you can inject a crazy guy in. So the relief enforcer, Danzy's patented the idea. When you hear Mike and Mike probably steal this later on, just know who gave it to you first. The relief enforcer. Fixing baseball one day at a time here. Relief enforcers, penalties before ejections. We do it all around here. Someone who did it all in the NBA last night, LeBron James. Giving it to you however you wanted, however you need it last night. And so much so that PJ Carlisimo got up on the mic and said some things that, spoiler alert, are probably going to make news today.
I used to get defensive, I think, because I knew Michael better because I coached against Michael. I knew him for so long, spent so much time with him. And I said, come on, you can't compare the two. Look at the championships. Look at what he's done. Well, guess what? LeBron is shutting me up because he's accumulating those things that what I thought was the difference were the rings and the things that, the consistency that Michael had done. LeBron coming up, you knew how good he was, and people were saying he's better. And I said, wait a minute, he's got to do the same thing. He's got to get those rings. He's got to sustain it for as long as Michael did. Well, he's doing it. And, it's not an accident. He's on that page. We look at the page and the two Hall of Famers bracketing LeBron in the middle. He deserves to be on that page.
Deserves to be there. PJ Carlisimo, a guy who's seen it from both sides, a guy who's seen both guys up close and personal. Let's go to George in Delaware. George, you're on first and last. What's up, man?
Hey, what's up, Mike? I was calling about the LeBron James situation. LeBron James is not better than Michael Jordan. LeBron James is playing against a bunch of D-League caliber players now. Michael Jordan played against a different Hall of Fame player every single night, or two every single night. Today's All-Stars will be role players and Michael Jordan's day.
Yeah. There are no stars in today's NBA, huh? There are no future Hall of Famers in today's NBA. We haven't talked about consistently what a great place the league is in with a lot of the young talent and stars spread out over the course of the league. We forget LeBron James going through some of those great Boston Celtics teams. We forget those Bulls teams that were super competitive. We forget better versions of the Pacers team that we saw led by Paul George that he went through. And the fact that, if you want to talk about an easy road there or a supporting cast, you can talk about all the Hall of Famers that he played against. We know now LeBron James has had some Hall of Famers he played playing with Dwayne Wade. We'll see. Kyrie Irving and Kevin Love, I don't think either of those guys are Hall of Famers where they sit right now. But you're talking about Michael Jordan, also played with some Hall of Famers to the point where, we remember that when he left to go play baseball, those Bulls teams fared all right. LeBron James skips town in Cleveland, and that team careens off a cliff, even led by Kyrie Irving, that they then get high in the draft.
Please keep the calls coming, because this is awesome. The excuses are just unbelievable. The newest one being that Michael Jordan played against Hall of Famers, and everyone in today's NBA, not a single Hall of Famer. Not one.
Trash. League full of trash at this point, which is just amazing. So keep those calls coming, 888-729-3776. Again, you can get us at the Twitter on the 1-800-Flowers.com Twitter feed too, at ESPN Radio, at M. Golic Jr. 57. There was another game last night. that did feature another otherworldly performance by one of the game's best young stars. A guy that when you talk expansion draft of the top players in the league, the top young players, probably near the top in Kawhi Leonard.
But no chance to make the Hall of Fame.
No,
because there aren't any in today's
not
NBA.
Not a Hall of Fame caliber player. 34 points, 7 rebounds, 8 assists, 3 steals from a guy who's been Defensive Player of the Year, a guy who's been a champion, but probably not Hall of Fame caliber. We'll make sure to temper our expectations for him. Snowflake. Kawhi Leonard going off last night in a game for the Spurs that you kind of saw coming. We said this the other day that in talking so much and glowingly about the Houston Rockets and what they represent style of play-wise, that this is still a San Antonio team with championship pedigree, a ton of pride, that got embarrassed on their home floor in game 1 of this series, and so they responded in kind last night. They went out there and they got it done in a big, big way, but they also suffered a big, big injury, and as much as we've talked about the aging backcourt for these guys, it's a backcourt that went out there and when they had to for them last night, play well. And before the injury, Tony Parker, 18 points last night on 8 of 13 shooting, but a big injury at that point in the game that it could affect the series going forward. And when Greg Popovich was asked about that injury, it's amazing how quickly we snap back into tried and true, our favorite post-game pop.
Pop, I know this is premature, but if Tony Parker is out for a significant amount of time.
I have no idea.
But how much, if that did happen?
We just finished the game. We'll find out about Tony. We haven't gotten together to talk about who's going to play instead. I have no idea.
It was all good just a day ago. Happy Pop, gone. You can understand the frustration of this Pop, though. Again, it's a lot easier for him to coach angry when the team is winning. But also, this is going to be a tough blow to a team to lose one of its veteran leaders and a guy who was a big part of why they did so well last night. Coming down awkwardly on his knee there, didn't look good, wasn't able to put any weight on it coming off the court, ended up getting carried most of the way off the court after trying to limp there, so we'll wait and see what the results are, but just looking at it visually, looks like one of those non-contact knee injuries that never really bodes well for the end result there, and we'll wait and see if and what effect that does have on the series if he's out for any extended period of time as it now shifts over to Houston. Houston already, if you, again, buy that the series doesn't start till someone wins one, they already, quote-unquote, stole one on the road in San Antonio to help get things done and help get this series started off there. So, again, we will wait and see what the injury status looks, but, Pop on Tony Parker's injury is quoted as saying, it's not good. Take that for what you will, but it doesn't sound like there's a lot of hope going forward for that.
First and last.
Our very own Booger McFarland joining us this morning. Appreciate you waking up early for us, Booger, as always.
Anytime, Junior. What's up, buddy?
Not too much, man. We got a lot going on. PJ Carlisimo has reignited the LeBron James-Jordan debate for us this morning and let us get a pretty good bit of calls in. But I wanted to ask you on a more serious note with what we saw with LeBron James in the NBA last night. Passes Kareem Abdul-Jabbar for second on the all-time postseason scoring list. And you were a great player yourself. You played with other, greats in your sport and our sport of football. When you look at LeBron James, what are some of the characteristics of these all-time greats that you see in him that are just the foundation for guys like this?
Well, number one, he's in great physical condition. He always talks about taking care of his body. And, he's been playing since he was 18. He's 32. That's 14 years in the league. And he looks in peak physical condition. So I think, number one, it starts with taking care of your body. And number two, I think it starts with never being satisfied. I mean, if LeBron James stopped playing right now, he's a Hall of Famer. He's one of the top 5 to 8 players of all time. Depending on who you talk to, I think it'd be safe to say he's on that list there. And I think thirdly, man, there's a competitiveness that you can't teach. It's something that's ingrained in you based on how you grew up to be the best. I think you and I both have seen guys that have had talent that never materialized into anything. I think we've both seen guys that if you saw them at a young age, you said that guy's going to be special. And 2 or 3 years later, a guy may be in jail or not even playing that particular sport. So I think the competitiveness and the will to be great is something that you can't teach. It's something that you don't find everywhere. But when you do, and you find that combination of skill, athleticism, taking care of your body, wanting to win, you get a special package, and that package only comes every so often in any particular sport.
No, that is, and that's a great point, Booger, and one that I was thinking about earlier this morning. It's so rare that we see a player with everything that we've expected, all the expectations we laid on LeBron James from the time he was in high school, and to see a guy live up to that, and you're right, it's because his standard is much higher than anything we could possibly want for him. And so we go from an all-time great in the NBA to a situation in Major League Baseball that was a lot uglier earlier this week, Booger. We saw everything that happened in Boston with the Adam Jones situation, his claim of racial slurs being thrown at his way during the game in the baseball season. And listen, Booger, you're a black man who played professionally at the highest level. Was this something that you ever encountered during your career?
No, I was never called that per se. I've seen teammates that were the victim of racial slurs, and Junior, it's unfortunately it's part of the society we've lived in, because of how this nation was formed and where we are right now. And as a former black professional athlete, I've understood the climate. I've also understood that it's not everyone. Just like if you look at the situation in Boston, the overwhelming majority of the people in Boston are great people. And I know a lot of people in Boston. It's a great city, got a lot of great golf courses up there in the northern area in Massachusetts. But there are people, just like in every city, there are people that are still stuck behind times. And if you listen to CC Sabathia, he talked about that there's a few MLB players that are African-American, and they really, really kind of feel the wrath when they go to Boston more than any other city. And I think that speaks volumes about some of the people up there. But by no shape or form are we saying it's everyone in Boston, but you definitely hear more stories about the Boston area. And hopefully this will bring awareness across the country, because junior sports are a microcosm of life, meaning whatever you see in sports, you're going to see in life, just on a larger scale. And I think the fact that a small percentage of the people in Boston, still want to refer to African-American men as the N-word, or someone in San Francisco wants to throw bananas at Adam Jones, lets you know that in the society that we live in, there are still people that think that the black race is inferior to them. And it's sad, but it's the reality. And the sooner we deal with reality, the sooner we can understand and try to do something about it.
Talking to Booger McFarland, ESPN college football analyst here on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Booger with some great, profound words on that subject there. We'll get back to, just because we've got you here, Booger, we know you're such a great football analyst for us. We'll take a look back at the draft from this last weekend. A lot of things have already come to pass with those storylines, but we know we bring you guys up to Mike and Mike every Monday through Friday, and by the end of this week, they'll have had on all three of the coaches from teams that traded up in the first round to get quarterbacks. The Bears moved up to get Mitchell Trubisky at number 2. Houston moves up to get Deshaun Watson at the 12 spot, and then at 10, Patrick Mahomes goes to Kansas City. Of those three teams, Booger, which do you think got the best bang for their buck with the quarterback that they picked?
Deshaun Watson, because I think right now, if we were to go to Vegas and we were to get somebody to set a line on which guy is going to be more successful based on a number of factors, I think Deshaun Watson will be that guy. I thought he was the best quarterback in this draft based on experience, based on resume, based on watching the tape. Now, I understand potential may be higher in some areas for other quarterbacks, depending on if you ask Andy Reid or John Fox. However, with that being said, I go back and I watch the tape, Junior. Deshaun Watson jumps off the tape. And, the fact that he's gone to a team that has a defense that's ready to win, I think it's only going to enhance his situation. I think if he does win the job, he's not going to have to put up 30 points a game because his defense is not going to give up many. Think about having a seasoned Deshaun Watson in New England a few years ago when we all thought in the first quarter that the Texans were better than the Patriots. They just had no answer at the quarterback position. Now put a guy in there that can actually be accurate with the football. Put a guy in there that when you blitz him, he can get outside the pocket and make some plays. I think Houston will be very wise to get Deshaun Watson ready to play, because in no other way he will bring an element to the team that he will be able to improvise, which until he understands throwing the football from the pocket will be very, very useful for that team.
Talking to Booger McFarland and a Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Booger, another storyline in the draft was certainly a lot of the guys with off-the-field issues that found new homes in the draft, one of which the story going away during the pre-draft process was Oklahoma former running back Joe Mixon, who now lands with the Cincinnati Bengals, who are a team their own right with some guys with an interesting history of off-the-field issues there under Marvin Lewis. How do you see the fit working out for him, for Joe Mixon in Cincinnati?
I think it'll be fine. Cincinnati's offensive line is pretty good on the interior. On the tackle spot, they struggle a little bit, especially losing Whitworth and some of the guys there. He'll be in a rotation with Giovanni Bernard once he comes back off the ACL. So I think it's a good situation. Marvin Lewis has proven to take a chance on guys, and for the most, he's been rewarded. You know, Pac-Man Jones, a lot of people wouldn't touch him, but he's had a lot of productive years in Cincinnati and played really, really well. So Marvin understands that. I think Joe Mixon was the second best all-around back in this draft. When you combine the ability to run, catch, block, the whole nine, I think he was the second best back in the draft. So Cincinnati definitely got a great value. And I think with John Ross, the receiver, being a questionable pick that high, even though he's very talented, I think you can see what they're trying to do in Cincinnati. They're trying to load their offense back up the way they had it a few years ago.
Certainly giving Andy Dalton a lot of weapons. Booger, before we let you go, it's rare that we get a bona fide college football headline during this time of year, but Alabama made some waves in the offseason, surprisingly, giving Nick Saban an 8-year deal that runs through 2025, paying out $65 million for Nick Saban. We talked before about LeBron James with someone who's never satisfied with that competitive fire. I mean, is there any end in sight for Nick Saban, who's already accomplished so much in college football?
Why would there be? I mean, he's the best coach of all time, and that's arguable. I understand that. But for my book, he's the best coach of all time. He gets the majority of the best players that he wants from around the country. And if you just look at the success rate, then to me, it's a pretty easy answer to keep going. And Junior, think about this: there's two ways to get paid usually in any industry or field that you work in. One, you have impeccable timing, meaning your contract is up or you're looking for the job at the right time, the right place, and you have leverage. Or two, have an impeccable resume. Nick Saban has an impeccable resume that nobody in the country can touch and probably wouldn't touch for the next 10 years if he stopped coaching. So the fact that he got a deal that's paying him $11 million per year this season really is about his resume that says, I'm the best, I'm always going to be the best. So when Jim Harbaugh gets $9 million a year and hasn't won anything at the University of Michigan, my board, my agent, my people in Tuscaloosa are going to make sure I'm the highest paid guy because I should be. And I think that if you have a problem with that, then that's really on you. The impact economically that football has had on the state of Alabama is way beyond just the stadium. Look at the enrollment in Tuscaloosa. Look at the out-of-state enrollment. People are flocking to go to Tuscaloosa. And I'll tell you, it's a good state. It's a good atmosphere. But there's no reason to leave a lot of places to go to Tuscaloosa, except you want to be a part of what the atmosphere is like there because Nick Saban has a winning atmosphere, and in turn, the university has a winning atmosphere. They got new facilities going up everywhere, man, and it's all due to the money that football is bringing in. And you got to attribute a lot of that to Nick Saban. That's why $11 million is not close to being enough.
As someone who went to college in South Bend, Indiana, Booger, I can attest to the power of football to affect regions where there otherwise wouldn't be a lot going on. Booger, you're the best in our book, man. We appreciate you taking the time to join us this morning.
Anytime, Junior. Take it easy, buddy.
Thank you for listening to the First and Last podcast. You can listen and subscribe to all ESPN podcasts in the Listen tab of the ESPN app. First and Last.